The morning light filtered through our floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the marble kitchen island where Nora sat scrolling through her emails. 28 years of marriage, and she still looked stunning in her silk robe, auburn hair catching the Seattle sunrise. I poured 2 cups of coffee from our Italian espresso machine, the ritual as familiar as breathing. "Ellie's calling in 5 minutes about the flowers," she said, without looking up, her manicured fingers dancing across her phone screen. "Something about peonies versus roses for the centerpieces." I handed her the coffee, steam curling between us. "Our daughter, the perfectionist. Wonder where she gets that from." Nora's laugh was warm honey. "Not from you, that's for sure. You'd be happy with dandelions if they told a good story." The video call chimed right on schedule. Ellie's face filled my laptop screen, her excitement infectious even through the pixels. At 28, she had my determination but Nora's charm, a dangerous combination that was already making waves in San Francisco's tech scene. "Dad, Mom, you're not going to believe this venue we found for the rehearsal dinner," she gushed, her fiancé Alex visible in the background of their apartment. "It's this gorgeous yacht club overlooking the bay. Alex found it through his family connections." "Sounds expensive," I said, earning a playful swat from Nora. "It's our only daughter's wedding," Nora chided. "Besides, the Carmichael and Associates deal just closed. We can afford to celebrate properly." I watched my wife's face light up as she discussed catering options with Ellie. This was Nora in her element, orchestrating perfection, every detail considered. It's what made her one of Seattle's most sought-after real estate developers. It's also what made her impossible to argue with when she set her mind to something. After we hung up, I found myself studying the photo magneted to our Sub-Zero refrigerator, a faded snapshot from Nora's college days. She was laughing with her sorority sisters, young and carefree, wearing a University of Washington sweatshirt I'd never seen her in. "You're staring," she said, following my gaze. "Just remembering when we were their age. All that uncertainty ahead of us." "Uncertainty?" She moved behind me, her arms encircling my waist. "I knew exactly what I wanted the moment I met you at that journalism conference in Portland." The memory made me smile despite myself. Rain-soaked and passionate, both of us young reporters chasing the same corruption story. She'd been interning at a PR firm while I was cutting my teeth at a weekly paper. The connection was instant, electric. "You mean after you turned me down the first 3 times I asked you out?" "I was playing hard to get," she murmured against my neck. "Had to make sure you were serious." What she didn't mention was how chaotic those early months had been. We'd dated, broken up, gotten back together more times than I could count. Young love, we called it later. Growing pains. By the time I proposed in that same rainy Portland park 9 months later, we'd both learned to fight for what mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from my editor at the Herald. The city corruption story I'd been working on had legs. Bigger than we'd initially thought. 3 city council members taking kickbacks from a development consortium. All of it traced through a paper trail that led back to some very familiar names in Seattle's construction scene. "Work calling?" Nora asked, recognizing the look on my face. "Always is, but nothing that can't wait until after our daughter's wedding." She kissed my cheek, her lips lingering. "This is why I married you, Harlan Mitchell. Family always comes first." The next week blurred together in a familiar rhythm. Days chasing sources through coffee shops and parking garages, piecing together financial records that revealed just how deep the corruption went. The adrenaline never got old. That moment when scattered facts crystallized into an undeniable story. It's what had kept me in investigative journalism for 3 decades, even when the industry crumbled around us. Evenings belonged to Nora and wedding planning. We'd spread brochures across our dining room table, debating everything from string quartet selections to wine pairings. Nora handled the details with military precision, while I mostly nodded and wrote checks. "Your job is to show up in a tux and walk our daughter down the aisle," she'd tease when I questioned the necessity of having both a wedding planner and a day of coordinator. "And give a speech without embarrassing anyone." Well, let's not set unrealistic expectations. Friday evening found us hosting Ellie and Alex for the weekend. Our daughter had driven up from San Francisco, ostensibly to finalize vendor contracts, but really just to spend time with us. Alex, bless him, had learned to navigate our family dynamics with the skill of a diplomat. We ordered pizza and sprawled across the living room, old home videos playing on our wall-mounted TV. There was 6-year-old Ellie's first soccer game where she'd scored on her own goal and cried for 20 minutes. Teenage Ellie's high school graduation, where she'd thanked us for putting up with my dramatic phase. "God, look at Dad's hairline," Ellie laughed, pointing at the screen. "Hey, I had a full head of hair when you were born," I protested. "You kids are what turned me gray." "Mom, you look exactly the same," Alex observed, and I had to agree. Nora possessed one of those ageless faces that photographers loved, all sharp cheekbones and expressive eyes. "Pilates and good genes," she said, but I caught something in her expression when the video lingered on her younger self, a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify. "Remember your sorority days?" Ellie asked. "You never talk about college." "Ancient history," Nora deflected smoothly. "Besides, your father's stories are much more interesting. Tell Alex about that time you spent 3 days staked out in a parking lot to catch that judge taking bribes." The conversation shifted, but I filed away the moment. In 28 years of marriage, I'd learned to read my wife's tells. The way her smile tightened when certain subjects came up. How she'd change topics when pressed about her past. I'd always assumed everyone had parts of their history they preferred to keep private. Later, after Ellie and Alex had gone to bed in the guest room, Nora and I sat on our back deck overlooking Elliott Bay. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars, and the sound of water against the seawall below provided a gentle soundtrack. "I got an interesting email today," I said, pulling out my phone. "Remember Tom Brennan from the old days? Used to cover real estate for the Business Journal?" "Vaguely." "He's freelancing now, working on some piece about Seattle's development boom in the late 90s. Said something about ghosts from 96 still influencing deals today." I showed her the cryptic message. "Probably just fishing for sources." Nora's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her wine glass. "The 90s feel like a lifetime ago." "Tell me about it. Sometimes I can barely remember what we were like back then." "Young and stupid," she said with a laugh that sounded forced. "Thank God we grew up." The next morning brought chaos in the best possible way. Nora had scheduled appointments at 3 different bridal shops, determined to find the perfect mother-of-the-bride dress. Ellie endured the fittings with good humor, while Alex and I retreated to my study. "Your daughter's amazing," he said, settling into one of my leather chairs. "I keep waiting for her to realize she can do better than a guy who writes code for a living." "Trust me, she knows exactly what she's doing. Ellie's never made a decision lightly in her life." "Speaking of decisions," Alex said, pulling out his tablet, "I've been working on a surprise wedding gift. You know how Ellie loves family history? I've been digitizing old documents, photos, letters, creating a comprehensive family archive. I found some really interesting stuff about both sides of the family. Something cold settled in my stomach. What kind of stuff? Old newspaper clippings, college yearbooks, business records. Did you know Nora's family owned a small construction company in the 80s? And there's this whole box of her personal papers from the 90s I found in your attic. Journals, letters, photos. Real treasure trove. You went through our attic? Nora gave me permission last week. Said there were some old photo albums up there I could scan. Alex's enthusiasm was infectious and alarming. The journals especially. Such a window into who she was before you two got serious. My mouth had gone dry. Journals? Yeah, this leather-bound notebook from '96. Really detailed entries about her work, her social life, relationships. I only skimmed it, but there's some great material about your early courtship, the ups and downs, her uncertainty about settling down. Very honest stuff. The room felt like it was tilting. Where is this notebook now? Back in the attic. I photographed the relevant pages but left everything where I found it. Figured you might want to look through it yourself. Maybe incorporate some of those memories into your wedding speech. I excused myself and climbed the narrow stairs to our attic, my heart hammering against my ribs. The space was cluttered with decades of accumulated life. Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes labeled in Nora's precise handwriting. I found the hope chest Alex had mentioned, an antique piece Nora's grandmother had left her. Inside, beneath layers of tissue paper and mothballs, I found the notebook. Black leather, worn soft at the edges, with 1996 embossed in fading gold letters on the cover. I opened it with trembling fingers, and Nora's younger handwriting stared back at me, looping, confident, full of life. March 15th, 1996. Started the internship at Beacon Marketing today. Victor Lang seems impressed with my portfolio. Very sophisticated, nothing like the boys at school. Harlan and I are taking a break again. Honestly, I'm exhausted by all the back and forth. Maybe it's time to see what else is out there. I flip through pages rapidly, my journalist's eye scanning for key dates, significant entries. The narrative that emerged made my blood turn to ice water. April 3rd, 1996. Victor asked me to work late on the Henderson account. Ended up having drinks at his office. He's married but says his wife doesn't understand his ambitions. Feel terrible for enjoying his attention, but Harlan seems so young compared to him. V knows what he wants. April 20th, 1996. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. Victor's hands in my hair, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. This is so wrong but feels so right. Told Harlan I'm too busy with work to see him this weekend. Technically true. My hands were shaking now. I found a photo tucked between pages. Nora in a summer dress, radiant and glowing, with a man I recognized from old business journals. Victor Lang, silver-haired and sharp-suited, his arm around her waist. On the back, in Nora's handwriting, Summer '96, happiest I've ever been. I forced myself to keep reading. June 10th, 1996. 3 months of sneaking around and I think I'm falling in love. Victor talks about leaving his wife, starting fresh. Says I'm nothing like the college girls he usually meets. Harlan called today. Wants to work things out. Don't know what to tell him. Heart says Victor. Head says Harlan is safer. August 27th, 1996. Everything's falling apart. Victor got the promotion to regional director and suddenly I'm too much of a distraction. His words. Says his wife is suspicious and he needs to focus on his career. Just like that, 3 months of promises evaporated. Feel like such an idiot. August 30th, 1996. Harlan drove down from Portland yesterday. Said he's tired of our games, wants to try again properly. Looked so earnest standing on my doorstep with flowers from the farmer's market. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but Victor's rejection still stings. Maybe it's time to stop chasing fantasies and build something real. The next entry was dated 2 weeks later. September 12th, 1996. Missed my period. This cannot be happening. If I'm pregnant, there's no way to know whose it is. Victor's or Harlan's. The timing is too close. God, what have I done? My vision blurred. I had to grip the edge of the hope chest to keep from falling. September 20th, 1996. Confirmed. 8 weeks along, which puts conception right in the middle of everything. Harlan's been so sweet lately, talking about our future, how much he loves me. How can I tell him I might be carrying another man's child? How can I not? October 5th, 1996. Told Harlan about the pregnancy today. The joy on his face nearly broke me. He proposed right there in my living room, said he'd been carrying the ring around for weeks waiting for the right moment. Guess a baby counts as the right moment. Pray to God this child is his. If it's not, I'll make sure he never finds out. October 15th, 1996. Harlan's so excited about the wedding, wants to elope before I start showing. Keep catching myself studying his features, looking for similarities that might predict what our baby will look like. Victor's eyes, Harlan's jaw. This secret is going to eat me alive, but I can't destroy the happiness in Harlan's eyes. He deserves better than the truth. The final entry was dated just before our wedding. November 30th, 1996. Tomorrow, I become Mrs. Harlan Mitchell. Part of me is genuinely excited. Harlan's a good man who will be a wonderful father. The other part feels like I'm building my future on quicksand. But Victor's made his choice, and I'm making mine. This baby will have a father who wants her, and that's what matters. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. I sat in that dusty attic for an hour, reading and rereading those entries until the words burned themselves into my memory. 29 years of marriage. 28 years of raising a daughter who might not be mine. A lifetime built on a lie so fundamental, it made my entire reality feel like tissue paper. Downstairs, I could hear Nora laughing with Ellie, probably showing off potential dresses. The sound that used to warm my heart now made me nauseous. I carefully returned the notebook to its hiding place and walked downstairs on unsteady legs. In the kitchen, Nora was modeling a navy blue cocktail dress while Ellie took photos. "What do you think, Dad?" Ellie asked. "Sophisticated enough for the mother of the bride?" I looked at my wife of 28 years, this woman I thought I knew completely, and forced my voice to remain steady. "Beautiful. You look beautiful." Nora's smile could have powered the city. "You always say the right thing." The rehearsal dinner 2 days later passed in a surreal haze. I gave my speech about love and commitment while internally screaming. I toasted Nora's beauty and grace while planning my next move. I watched our daughter's happiness and swore that whatever came next, I wouldn't let it touch her special day. But once the wedding was over, all bets were off. The ceremony itself was perfect, just as Nora had orchestrated. Ellie was radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace. Alex couldn't stop grinning, and I somehow managed to walk my daughter down the aisle without collapsing under the weight of my secret knowledge. During the reception, I watched Nora work the room with practiced ease, charming Alex's family, coordinating with vendors, playing the role of gracious hostess. Every smile felt like another knife twist. How long had she been acting? How many of our intimate moments had been performance? "You okay, Dad?" Ellie appeared at my elbow during the dancing. You seem a million miles away. Just emotional, I lied. My little girl is all grown up. She hugged me tight. I'm so glad you and Mom made it work all those years ago. You two are proof that real love exists. I held my daughter close and wondered if she was even mine. The week after the wedding, I threw myself into work with manic intensity. The corruption story provided a welcome distraction, and I spent long hours tracking financial records and interviewing sources. But even buried in spreadsheets, my mind kept circling back to that notebook. I needed more information before I made any moves. This wasn't a story I could half-ass. There would only be one chance to get it right. Using the same methodical approach I'd honed over 3 decades in journalism, I began investigating my own life. I started with public records, cross-referencing dates and locations from Nora's journal entries. Victor Lang had indeed worked at Beacon Marketing in 1996 before transitioning to real estate development consulting. His firm, Lang & Associates, had grown steadily over the years, specializing in high-end residential projects. The kind of projects Nora's company regularly collaborated with. I accessed our joint cloud storage account, something we'd set up years ago for sharing family photos and documents. Buried in Nora's personal folder, I found financial records that made my blood run cold. Regular consulting payments from Lang & Associates, dating back 15 years. Not huge amounts, nothing that would trigger tax scrutiny, but consistent enough to suggest an ongoing relationship. The photo from the notebook haunted me. I'd had it digitized and enhanced, studying every pixel for clues. The timestamp confirmed what I'd feared. Late September 1996, right around Ellie's conception window. Nora looked radiant, glowing with something I now recognized wasn't just happiness. It was love. The kind of desperate, consuming passion I'd thought she felt for me. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally worked up the courage to get a paternity test. Using samples from Ellie's toothbrush during a family dinner felt like the ultimate betrayal, but I had to know. The waiting period nearly killed me, but the results were clear. Ellie was mine. Genetically, unquestionably, completely mine. The relief was overwhelming and short-lived. Because if Ellie was my daughter, then Nora's anguish in those journal entries was even worse than I'd imagined. She'd been tortured by uncertainty, prepared to build our marriage on a lie, all while believing she might be tricking me into raising another man's child. The woman I'd loved for 29 years was a stranger. I started following Victor Lang's movements, using skills I'd developed tracking corrupt politicians and corporate executives. His firm occupied a sleek downtown office building, all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed success. I posed as a potential client, toured their offices, listened to their pitch about transforming Seattle's residential landscape. Victor had aged well, silver hair now completely white, but still sharp-eyed and commanding. During our meeting, he mentioned several ongoing projects in collaboration with some of the city's most innovative developers. When I asked for examples, Nora's company topped the list. "Exceptional woman," he said, with what seemed like professional admiration. "We've worked together for years. She has an instinct for what buyers want." I wondered if that instinct extended to knowing what married men wanted. That evening, I confronted Nora indirectly. We were having dinner on our deck when I casually mentioned meeting with Victor's firm about a potential investment property. Her fork clattered against her plate. "You met with Victor Lang? You know him?" "Professionally. We've collaborated on several projects." Her voice was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tremor. What kind of investment are you considering? Nothing specific, just exploring options for retirement planning. She relaxed fractionally. I could have introduced you, saved you the cold call. How long have you two been working together? On and off for years. He's very well connected in the industry. I filed away her evasion. In journalism, the information people don't volunteer is often more revealing than what they do. Over the next month, I compiled a comprehensive file on my wife's secret life. The ongoing consulting payments suggested their relationship hadn't ended in 1996. It had simply gone underground. Professional collaboration providing cover for personal connection. I found receipts for expensive lunches at hotels where Victor frequently entertained clients. Conference registrations for industry events they'd both attended. A paper trail of proximity that painted a damning picture. But I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed proof of current infidelity or financial impropriety. Something concrete enough to justify the nuclear option I was contemplating. The break came from an unexpected source. Mia Hendricks, Nora's former sorority sister, now worked as a real estate agent for a competing firm. I'd met her several times over the years at industry events. Always found her refreshingly direct. I invited her for coffee under the guise of seeking advice about the investment property. "Harlan, how lovely to hear from you," she gushed over the phone. "Though I have to warn you, poaching me for real estate advice might not sit well with your darling wife." We met at a trendy cafe in Capitol Hill, away from Nora's usual haunts. Mia was a whirlwind of energy and opinions, exactly the type who couldn't keep secrets if her life depended on it. "So you're finally ready to diversify beyond journalism?" she asked, stirring honey into her latte. "Thinking about it. Nora mentioned you might have insights into the current market. Your wife's the expert, not me, though I suppose she's been distracted lately with all those consulting gigs." Mia's tone held a hint of something. Jealousy, perhaps. "Consulting gigs?" "Oh, you know, Nora. Always working some angle. All those cozy meetings with Victor Lang's team. Very strategic, your wife." I kept my expression neutral. "They've worked together for years, haven't they?" "Since forever. Though lately it seems more intense. Last month I saw them at the Fairmont, very deep in conversation. Looked more like therapy than business, if you know what I mean." My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "The Fairmont's nice for client meetings." "At 7 p.m. on a Friday?" Mia raised an eyebrow. "With wine instead of coffee? Come on, Harlan. I may be nosy, but I'm not blind." I managed to keep the conversation light after that, but my hands were shaking by the time I got home. 29 years of marriage, and my wife was still carrying on with the man who'd broken her heart in 1996. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Nora slept peacefully beside me. Her breathing was slow and even, her face relaxed in the moonlight filtering through our curtains. She looked innocent, beautiful, exactly like the woman I'd fallen in love with. I wondered if she ever thought about Victor when she was with me. If their professional collaboration included the kind of intimacy I'd thought we shared exclusively. The questions multiplied like cancer, eating away at every happy memory we'd built together. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Nora wanted to keep playing games, I'd show her what a professional investigator could uncover when properly motivated. I hired Marcus Webb, a private investigator I'd worked with on several stories over the years. Marcus was thorough, discreet, and completely without moral judgment, essential qualities when investigating one's own wife. "I need to know if she's having an affair," I told him, in his cramped downtown office. Current, not historical. And if there's any financial impropriety connected to her business relationships. Marcus didn't even blink. Timeline? However long it takes to get definitive proof. Budget? Whatever it costs. He quoted me a number that would have made me wince under normal circumstances. I wrote the check without hesitation. One question, Marcus said as I stood to leave. What are you planning to do with whatever I find? That depends on what you find. 3 weeks later, Marcus delivered a report that exceeded my worst expectations. Nora and Victor weren't having a traditional affair. They were having something worse. An emotional relationship that had persisted for decades, conducted through carefully orchestrated business meetings, and supported by a complex web of financial arrangements that bordered on money laundering. Victor's firm had been funneling contracts to Nora's company in exchange for below-market consulting fees that were then paid back through shell companies and offshore accounts. The setup was sophisticated enough to avoid casual detection, but sloppy enough to crumble under scrutiny. More damaging were the photographs. Not of sexual encounters, but of intimate conversations. Nora and Victor sharing wine at expensive restaurants, holding hands across tables, embracing in parking garages. The kind of emotional intimacy that felt like a deeper betrayal than simple physical cheating. The final piece of evidence was a letter Marcus had intercepted from their mail. Postmarked 3 days after our honeymoon in 1997, addressed to Nora in Victor's distinctive handwriting. My darling Nora, I know I have no right to contact you after everything that happened, but I can't stop thinking about what we had. Marriage doesn't change how I feel. If anything, it makes me realize what I've lost. If you ever want to explore what might have been, you know how to find me. Forever yours. Nora had kept that letter for 28 years. Hidden in her desk drawer, behind legal documents and tax records, like a talisman of her secret life. I sat in my car outside Marcus's office, reading the report for the 3rd time, and felt something crystallize inside me. Not just anger, that had been building for weeks. This was clarity, purpose. The same focused intensity I brought to investigative work now turned toward destroying the woman who'd destroyed my life. Nora thought she was clever, maintaining her double life for 3 decades. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd betrayed a journalist. Someone who made his living exposing secrets and ruining careers. I was very, very good at my job. The plan came together over the next month with elegant simplicity. I would use the same tools that had built my reputation, meticulous research, strategic disclosure, and perfect timing, to systematically dismantle Nora's carefully constructed facade. First, I needed to protect Ellie. My daughter was building her own career and didn't deserve to be collateral damage in this war. I began subtly encouraging her to distance herself from her mother's business network, suggesting alternative contacts and opportunities that would reduce any professional overlap. You know, sweetheart, I said, during one of our regular lunch meetings, Alex mentioned you were looking for seed funding for the new startup. I might know some investors who aren't tied into your mother's usual circles. Why wouldn't I want Mom's contacts? Ellie asked, surprised. No reason. Just thinking it might be good to establish your own professional identity. Show you can succeed independently. She considered this seriously. That's actually smart advice. I've been worried about seeming like I'm riding her coattails. Within 2 weeks, I'd connected Ellie with a venture capital firm on the East Coast, well outside Nora's sphere of influence. My daughter's talent spoke for itself. She secured initial funding faster than anyone expected. Phase 2 involved Victor Lang's downfall. The financial irregularities Marcus had uncovered were more than enough to trigger a federal investigation, but I wanted the story to break in my own paper first. I spent weeks crafting an exposé that would seem like routine investigative journalism while containing just enough specific detail to destroy Victor's career. The piece ran on a Tuesday morning under the headline, Seattle Development Firm Under Fire for Financial Irregularities. I'd been careful to focus on Victor's company while only mentioning Nora's firm in passing as one of several local contractors caught up in the investigation. The response was immediate and devastating. Victor's stock price plummeted. 3 major clients pulled contracts. By the end of the week, the SEC had opened a formal inquiry. Nora was frantic. She paced our kitchen that evening, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to manage the crisis. "This is insane," she said to whoever was on the other end. "Victor's projects are completely legitimate. Someone's trying to destroy his reputation." I looked up from my laptop, where I was pretending to work on a follow-up story. Rough day? You could say that. A close business associate just got torpedoed by some hatchet job in the Herald. "Which story?" I asked innocently. "The Victor Lang piece. Completely unfair character assassination." "I know the reporter who wrote it. Solid journalist. If he published it, there's probably substance behind the allegations." Nora's eyes flashed. "Not everyone's a Boy Scout, Harlan. Sometimes good people get caught in bad situations." "True," I agreed mildly. "Though in my experience, where there's smoke, there's usually fire." That night, after Nora went to bed, I began Phase 3, gathering evidence of her own financial improprieties. The consulting payments Marcus had documented were just the tip of the iceberg. Using the same forensic accounting techniques that had exposed dozens of corrupt politicians, I traced a decade-long pattern of financial arrangements that wouldn't survive regulatory scrutiny. Nora had been clever, but not clever enough. The shell companies, offshore accounts, and circular payments that had seemed sophisticated in the 1990s looked amateurish by current standards. Once federal investigators started pulling threads, the whole structure would unravel. I just needed to make sure they knew where to look. The anonymous tip I sent to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was a masterpiece of strategic information. I provided just enough detail to guide their investigation without revealing my own involvement. Within days, I received confirmation that they'd opened a preliminary inquiry into potential money laundering activities in Seattle's real estate development sector. The net was closing. 3 months after finding that notebook, Nora received notice that her company was under federal investigation for financial irregularities. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning while she was getting ready for an industry awards ceremony where she was scheduled to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. "This can't be happening," she whispered, clutching the official letterhead with trembling hands. I read over her shoulder, feigning shock. "What kind of irregularities?" "Money laundering, conspiracy. It's all completely fabricated." She looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Harlan, you have connections at the federal level. Isn't there someone you could call?" For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. She looked so lost, so vulnerable, exactly like the woman I'd comforted through 1,000 smaller crises over the years. Then I remembered the letter in her desk drawer. The decades of lies. The secret meetings with Victor Lang. "I'm sorry, honey," I said, pulling her into a hug that felt like embracing a stranger. "But you know I can't interfere with an ongoing investigation. It would be unethical." That evening, I sat in the audience as Nora accepted her award. She gave a gracious speech about integrity and professional excellence while federal agents were probably already reviewing her financial records. The irony was almost too perfect. After the ceremony, we mingled with Seattle's business elite, many of whom had read my Victor Lang exposé and were quietly distancing themselves from anyone associated with him. I watched Nora work the room with increasing desperation, trying to salvage relationships that were already beyond repair. "Harlan," a familiar voice called out. Tom Brennan, the freelance reporter who'd sent me that cryptic email months ago, appeared at my elbow with a champagne flute and a knowing smile. "Tom, good to see you again." "Likewise. Hell of a story you broke about Victor Lang. I've been working a similar angle for months." Something cold settled in my stomach. Similar angle? The whole Seattle development scene in the 90s. Amazing how many current players trace back to that period. Your wife's name keeps coming up in my research. I kept my expression neutral. In what context? Old relationships, business connections. You know how incestuous this industry is. Tom's smile sharpened. "I'm particularly interested in a certain marketing firm internship program from 1996. Very cozy arrangements between young women and established executives. Sounds like ancient history." "Maybe, though some of those relationships seem to have had remarkable staying power." Tom glanced across the room to where Nora was deep in conversation with the group of investors. Amazing how the past keeps influencing the present. I excused myself and found Nora by the bar, her face pale despite perfect makeup. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just tired. Can we go home?" During the drive back to our house, she was unusually quiet. I'd learned to read her silences over the years, and this one felt different. Heavier. "Who was that reporter you were talking to?" she asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Tom Brennan, freelancer, working on some story about local development trends." "What kind of trends?" "Historical stuff, mostly. How relationships formed in the 90s still influence current business patterns." Nora went very still. "Did he mention any specific people?" "Not really. Why?" "No reason. Just curious." But I could see the fear in her eyes, and I knew the endgame was approaching. 2 days later, Tom's story broke in Seattle Weekly under the title "Power, Politics, and Personal Connections: How Seattle's Development Elite Built Their Empire." The piece was a masterful blend of historical research and contemporary analysis, tracing the career trajectories of major players from their early days through current prominence. Nora's section was devastating. Real estate mogul Nora Mitchell, née Harrison, built her reputation on an uncanny ability to secure profitable development partnerships, particularly with Lang & Associates consulting firm. Records suggest this professional relationship dates to 1996, when Harrison was a marketing intern and Victor Lang was a senior executive. While both parties describe their collaboration as purely professional, financial records reveal a complex web of consulting fees, partnership arrangements, and profit-sharing agreements that have generated millions in revenue over nearly 3 decades. Of particular interest are documented meetings between Mitchell and Lang at upscale restaurants and hotels, often outside normal business hours, that former colleagues describe as unusually intimate for professional consultations. When asked about the nature of these meetings, Mitchell's representatives declined to comment. The story included several of Marcus's photographs, carefully cropped to show Nora and Victor in compromising but not explicitly sexual situations. The caption read, business partners. Nora Mitchell and Victor Lang discussed development strategies at an industry event. I found Nora in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of our bed with the article spread across her lap. She'd been crying, her perfect makeup smeared and ruined. "How long have you known?" she asked without looking up. "Known what?" "Don't." Her voice was flat, defeated. "Please don't make this worse by pretending." I sat down beside her, close enough to touch but not touching. "Since the night before Ellie's wedding. I found your journal." She nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. "Alex mentioned going through old boxes. I should have gotten rid of that notebook years ago." "Why didn't you?" "Same reason people keep love letters, I suppose. Evidence that it was real, even if it was wrong." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 28 years pressing down between us. "Are you having an affair with Victor Lang?" I asked finally. "Not the way you mean." "What way do I mean?" "Sexual, physical. We haven't, not since 1996. "But emotional?" She was quiet for a long time. "Yes." The simple honesty of it hit harder than any elaborate lie would have. "How long?" It never really stopped. Even after he broke things off, even after we got married. We'd run into each other at industry events, exchange pleasantries. Then in 2010, his firm started expanding into residential development. It made sense to collaborate professionally. And personally? We'd have lunch sometimes, talk about work, life, our kids. It felt safe, like visiting an old friend. Friends don't hold hands in parking garages. She looked up sharply. "You had me followed?" "I had to know the truth." "The truth?" Her laugh was bitter. "The truth is that I've been living a lie for so long I don't remember what honesty feels like. The truth is that I love you and I love him, and I've been torn between two lives for 30 years. The truth is that I'm tired, Harlan. So goddamn tired of keeping secrets." "Is Ellie mine?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "I had a paternity test done when she was 3 months old. Took hair samples while she slept. She's yours. Completely and absolutely yours." "But you weren't sure when she was born." "No. The timing was too close. Those last few months of pregnancy were torture, wondering, preparing myself to confess if she came out looking like Victor." I felt something break loose inside my chest, some knot of tension I'd carried for months. "Why didn't you tell me when you found out for sure?" "Because I was a coward. Because by then we'd built this beautiful life together and I couldn't bear to destroy it over something that was already resolved." "It wasn't resolved though, was it? You kept seeing him. You kept taking his money." "The consulting fees were legitimate. Mostly." "Mostly?" "Some of it was personal. Victor felt guilty about how things ended in '96. Said he owed me on the opportunities I missed because of him. I told myself it was just business, but it wasn't. No, it wasn't." I stood up, walked to our bedroom window, looked out at the life we'd built together. The manicured lawn, the view of Elliott Bay, the neighbors' kids playing basketball in their driveway. Everything looked exactly the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. "What happens now?" Nora asked quietly. "I don't know." "Are you going to divorce me?" "Probably." "Will you destroy me first?" I turned around to look at her. This woman I'd loved for 3 decades, sitting broken on our marital bed. "I already am." The next morning brought a cascade of consequences. The FBI raided Nora's office, seizing computers and financial records. 3 major clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about regulatory compliance. The Seattle Times picked up Tom's story, amplifying it to a wider audience. By noon, Nora's business phone had been disconnected. By evening, her company's website had been taken down. By the end of the week, she'd been forced to close Mitchell Development permanently. I watched it all unfold with the same detached professionalism I'd brought to covering political scandals and corporate malfeasance. It was a beautiful destruction, precise and thorough, and completely legal. Victor Lang's situation was even worse. The SEC investigation had uncovered evidence of securities fraud dating back 15 years. He'd been arrested, charged, and released on bail pending trial. His company's assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed. His marriage ended when his wife filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial impropriety. The local business press began referring to it as the Lang scandal, though they might as well have called it the Mitchell scandal, for all the damage it did to Nora's career. Through it all, I maintained the facade of the supportive husband. I brought Nora coffee during her meetings with lawyers. I held her while she cried over the wreckage of her career. I fielded concerned calls from Ellie and assured our daughter that everything would be fine. But late at night, alone in my study, I worked on the final phase of my plan. The book proposal that would cement Victor and Nora's place in Seattle's Hall of Shame. Betrayal in the Boardroom: How Power Couples Built an Empire on Lies would be part investigative journalism, part memoir, part cautionary tale. I'd already received interest from 3 major publishers based on a brief outline. The proposal opened with a scene I'd replayed in my mind countless times. I found my wife's secret on the night before our daughter's wedding, hidden in a hope chest like a time bomb waiting 30 years to explode. The leather journal contained the truth about our marriage, our family, our entire life together. And it changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the price of keeping secrets. 6 months after discovering Nora's journal, I filed for divorce. Washington's no-fault laws meant the process was straightforward, but I'd had my attorney include a clause citing financial impropriety and breach of marital trust that would ensure I retained the majority of our shared assets. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed in 1997, drafted during Nora's cold feet period before our wedding, included language about financial disclosure that her recent legal troubles had clearly violated. What had seemed like unnecessary paperwork at the time became my salvation. Nora moved out of our waterfront house into a modest apartment in Queen Anne. Her legal fees had consumed most of her personal savings, and the federal investigation had frozen the business accounts. She took a job with a small property management company at a fraction of her former salary. I kept the house, the cars, the investment portfolio we'd built together over nearly 3 decades. It felt like fair compensation for 28 years of marriage based on a lie. Ellie struggled with the dissolution more than either of us. Our daughter had built her identity around our family's stability, and watching her parents' marriage implode was devastating. I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault, that our love for her remained unchanged regardless of what had happened between Nora and me. "I don't understand how people can live double lives for so long," she said during one of our regular dinners. We'd started meeting weekly after the separation, father-daughter bonding time that had become precious to both of us. "People are complicated," I said carefully. "Sometimes they make choices they can't figure out how to undo." "Do you hate her?" The question caught me off guard. Did I hate Nora? The woman who'd lied to me for 3 decades, who'd built our marriage on quicksand, who'd carried on an emotional affair for most of our adult life together? "I hate what she did," I said finally. But the woman I fell in love with was real, even if she wasn't the whole truth. Ellie nodded thoughtfully. Alex says forgiveness is really about letting go of anger so it doesn't poison your own life. Alex is a smart man. You chose well. I learned from the best. She squeezed my hand across the table. Even if the example was more complicated than I realized. The book deal came through 8 months after the divorce was finalized. The advance was substantial enough to fund early retirement, and the publisher was already talking about movie rights. My literary agent described it as a perfect storm of true crime, memoir, and social commentary that captures the zeitgeist of our post-truth era. I quit the Herald 6 weeks before publication, citing a desire to focus on longer-form storytelling. The truth was simpler. I'd accomplished what I set out to do, and it was time to start fresh. The book launch was held at Elliott Bay Book Company, the same independent bookstore where Nora and I had browsed together countless times over the years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Betrayal in the Boardroom hit the New York Times bestseller list 2 weeks after publication. The reviews were largely positive, praising my unflinching examination of how personal deception can corrupt professional relationships, and my journalist's eye for detail applied to the most personal of stories. A few critics called it a revenge fantasy disguised as social commentary, but most recognized it as what it was: a meticulously researched exposé of how two people's secret relationship had influenced millions of dollars in business deals over 3 decades. The morning the Times review was published, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Congratulations," Nora said. "I always knew you were a talented writer." "Thank you. I read the review online. It sounds like you told the story fairly." I tried to stick to the facts. "I'm sure you did." She paused. "I won't be reading it, obviously. But I wanted you to know that I don't blame you for writing it. You had every right to tell your side." "Our side," I corrected. "I included your perspective where I could. Based on journal entries I wrote when I was 24 and stupid. Based on the truth." Another pause. "Yes, based on the truth." I found myself gripping the phone tighter. "How are you doing, Nora?" "Surviving. Day by day, like everyone else." Her laugh sounded tired. "I'm thinking about leaving Seattle. Too many memories, too many burned bridges." "Where would you go?" "Maybe Portland. Start over somewhere people don't know my name." Portland. The city where we'd met, fallen in love, gotten engaged. Where our story began before it got complicated by ambition and secrets and the weight of trying to build a perfect life. "That sounds like a good plan." "Will you tell Ellie I called? I know she's still angry, but I want her to know I think about her every day." "I'll tell her." "Thank you." The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Harlan?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know." "I know. Do you think—" She stopped herself. "Never mind." "What?" "Do you think we could have made it work if I'd told you the truth back then? About Victor, about the uncertainty with Ellie, all of it?" The question I'd been avoiding for over a year. The one that kept me awake some nights, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom that had become just my bedroom. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe. We were so young then, so sure we could handle anything. We handled a lot. We did. I loved you, you know. Through all of it, even when I was confused about Victor, I loved you. That was never a lie." My throat felt tight. "I know that too. Goodbye, Harlan." Goodbye, Nora. I hung up the phone and sat in my empty house, listening to the silence that had become my constant companion. Outside, Elliott Bay sparkled in the afternoon sun, unchanged by the human drama that had played out in its shadow. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Elegant cardstock, expensive printing, the kind of formal announcement that announced new beginnings to the world. Ellie Mitchell, Carmichael and Alexander James. Carmichael requests the honor of your presence at the celebration of their first anniversary and the launch of Carmichael Technologies. She'd kept my name. Our daughter, building her empire, had chosen to honor the man who'd raised her rather than the woman who'd born her. It was a small victory in a war where victories felt increasingly hollow. I wrote her a check for $50,000, seed money for her new venture, an investment in the future that felt cleaner than anything from the past. The note I included was brief. For the fearless entrepreneur who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply success. Love always, Dad. 2 years after the divorce, I married again. Sarah was a librarian I'd met at a book signing, 15 years younger than me, with no connection to Seattle's business scene or my complicated past. She'd read my book and said it made her sad for everyone involved, especially the daughter who'd lost both parents to their mutual destruction. We had a small ceremony at the courthouse, witnessed by Ellie and Alex and a handful of close friends. No elaborate planning, no hidden agendas, no secrets waiting in hope chests to destroy us decades later. Just two people who'd decided to build something honest together. The last time I saw Nora was at Ellie's baby shower 3 years after our divorce. She'd moved back to Seattle, taken a job with a nonprofit housing organization, rebuilt her life on a smaller but more sustainable scale. She looked good. Older, obviously, but healthy. Happy, even. The desperate edge that had characterized her final years as a power broker was gone, replaced by something that looked like peace. We didn't speak directly, but I caught her eye across the room during Ellie's speech about motherhood and legacy. For just a moment, 30 years of history passed between us. The love, the lies, the damage, the endurance. Then Ellie called for everyone's attention, and the moment passed. Later, as guests were leaving, Nora approached me by the gift table. "She looks radiant," she said, nodding toward our daughter. "Pregnancy suits her. Grandchildren. Can you believe it?" I smiled despite everything. I can barely believe we're old enough to be grandparents. Time has a way of putting things in perspective, doesn't it? It does. She picked up her purse, hesitated. "I heard about your marriage. Congratulations." "Thank you. Is she good to you?" "Very good." "I'm glad." She looked like she wanted to say more, but settled for, "You deserve to be happy, Harlan." "So do you." As she walked away, I realized something had shifted. The anger that had driven me for so many months, that had fueled the investigation and the book and the systematic destruction of her career, was finally gone. Not because I'd forgiven her. That had happened gradually, imperceptibly, like aging or learning. But because I'd finally forgiven myself. For loving someone who'd lied to me. For building a life on an uncertain foundation. For raising a daughter in a house where one parent carried secrets that could have destroyed us all. For being human enough to want revenge and wise enough, eventually, to want peace more. 5 years after finding that notebook, I published my second book, Second Chances, a memoir of midlife, marriage, and moving forward. It was smaller, quieter than the first, more reflection than revelation, more hope than anger. The dedication read, "For Ellie, who taught me that love isn't about perfect parents but about parents who love perfectly. And for Sarah, who taught me that it's never too late to start over." At the launch party, held in the same bookstore where I'd begun my second career as an author, Ellie approached me with my 6-month-old grandson in her arms. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, shifting the baby to one hip so she could hug me. "For the book? For moving on? For showing me what resilience looks like?" I looked down at my grandson, Nora's grandson too, though she wasn't part of his life in any meaningful way, and felt something settle into place. The future stretching ahead, uncertain but clean. Honest. "Want to know a secret?" I told Ellie. "What?" "I'm finally ready to stop being a journalist and start being just a grandfather." She laughed, the sound bright and uncomplicated. "I think that's the best story you'll ever write." As the evening wound down and guests filtered out into the Seattle night, I stood by the bookstore window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay. Somewhere out there, Nora was living her smaller, quieter life. Victor Lang was serving his federal sentence. The past was finally, truly past. I thought about that notebook, the secret that had changed everything. Part of me wondered what would have happened if I'd never found it, if Ellie's wedding had passed peacefully and we'd all continued living our careful lives. But mostly, I was grateful. For the truth, even when it hurt. For the chance to build something better from the wreckage. For the family I'd raised and the family I was still building. And for the understanding that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's the decision to stop destroying yourself.